All right, radical simplicity. I'm actually really, but all I see is simp in the middle of this. I'm actually really excited about this website because I really hope that it speaks to what I feel. Let's find out. As developers, we love complexity. Type 1 in the chat if this is true. You know what? I've already the article's triggering me. I just genuinely don't believe this. Devs don't like complexity. I think we revel in complexity. I know that for a long time I loved striving after figuring out having the greatest TypeScript autocomplete, having this, having that, and I came to this one day. I came to this realization that if I just use a record string to string and not care, I'm going to finish the job significantly faster. And when I inevitably change it, I don't care, and it feels good, and I just walk away from it, and it's great. It feels good. It makes me feel great. We create complexity with SPAs, Vue, React, Transpiling, TypeScript, Babel, Webpack, Pure CSS, GraphQL, JSON, and on the back end with microservices, Protobuf, Kafka, InfluxDB, NoSQL databases. Kafka mentioned. Let's go. Kafka mentioned. By the way, I think Protobufs can be really, really great depending on the environment. So just like one little fun fact. One of my last little tasks at Netflix involved a lot of type problems. In fact, I even wrote an entire because it started off in a Mongo database, which was untyped. I actually wrote a library called Undefined, github.com/ there we go. This one, which would literally takes in a list of JSON responses and creates TypeScript code out of them. I know it's rather ridiculous, but if you don't have, since I literally could not figure out how to do this well, I actually just created a program that would create types for me because there were so many types. There's like 400 separate log messages. But the problem is that we had games in C++ that were emitting events to game runners in Go that had an autodoc in TypeScript. Like, how do you want to share 400 types? I mean, this makes sense. This is like a perfect protobuf situation, right? You have a type that is an agnostic kind of language independent specification, and then you can use it throughout your entire stack, right? So I thought protobuf was actually a pretty good use case there. Anyways, all right, let's keep on going. Sorry, I'm way off the rails here. This complexity is accidental and not in the problem domain. This complexity slows us down and makes development tiresome. This complexity leads to shallow domains. Radical simplicity makes development fast and joyful again. I do want to throw one more thing in there. When we did this, we started with no types, no protobufs, no nothing, and we just raw dogged this. That's why I wrote that undefined. That's why I wrote undefined, just to get that thing done, because we didn't do anything. We actually did approach it with radical simplicity. Just get the thing done first and kind of discover the edge cases, and as we discovered them, then we upgraded our solution into something that makes some sort of sense. And so I was really happy with it. This complexity needs a solution to manage it, which is often Kubernetes. If there's ever been a project that is used as a means to solve complexity artificially created, it's Kubernetes. It's beautiful. The amount of people right now, press 1 in the chat if you have more microservices than users on your project right now. You don't have to feel bad. Just type 1 in the chat if you have more microservices than users. It's okay. You know, no one's upset about it. No one's upset about it. It just happens. Which is, let's say, and you need to run these things, and which many microservices, and you need many machines, which leads to AWS, which brings it its own complexity. Now we define front-end engineers that write React apps, back-end engineers who write REST and GraphQL endpoints, and operation engineers that hold Kubernetes. This leads to complex test setups with mocks and local databases, Docker images, and build pipelines that take tens of minutes to run. Rather, sooner than later, development is tied down by a net of complexity. This statement alone is incredible. We came from something simple that worked to a massive, that worked to a massive complex thing in the last 2 decades. 2005 complexity. Authorization, routing, models, controllers, views, dependencies. Client. Nothing. Complexity 2021. Pre-rendering, asset packing, API, authorization, routing, models, controllers, views, dependencies. Virtual DOM, authorization, routing, model views, APIs, clients, controllers, views, dependencies. Granted, we've also got a lot more complex applications, right? What was just simply not possible in 2005 is now possible in 2021. We also had a bunch of companies that grew up with this, that through literally millions to billions of users had to grow into these more complex kind of stacks. and then sell them as the way that all developers should operate. But really, React, these really complex frameworks that can come from it, these server, like the whole RSC side of things, do you really need that for a marketing site? Like, I get that people are selling you that it's the easiest, greatest thing in the universe, and maybe it is the easiest, greatest thing in the universe. I'm just saying that your marketing site with like 3 price tags, a basic few sentences trying to sell something, a pretty graphic that slides in, do you really need all of that? Yes, and factual. Okay, I didn't realize that. I didn't know that you needed all of that just to make a sentence. Okay, hey, I didn't realize that. Okay, my bad. Hey, I said my bad. Okay, my bad. Skill issues, I get it. Based on the charts, Ryan Stout and Trick Swelling. Web applications got tremendously complex over the years. I mean, granted, they've also become just more requirements over the years. It takes a lot of time for doing a simple thing. Let's say for doing a simple thing, like adding a field to a form. By the way, this is a very great call out. If it takes more than like 30 minutes to add a field to a form, you have to ask yourself many questions. For example, a birthday field to a profile. Can't take that long. It often does. What should take minutes takes hours, and then things break, and then you spend a whole day making your house of cards run again, delicately balancing every service and every version of every framework and tool on top of each other's. The result of this is that the last thing developers do is writing business logic. If you look at what you are doing and count the lines, the smallest amount of time is writing real business logic, the ifs in your code. But a lot of serialization from databases with squeal into objects into JSON over the wire into React Store to a UI. Because, real talk. You have your true state is in your DB, which means that your server then serves out the state to the client. Then the client holds on to the state and then actually attempts to merge state updates into these stores to update the UI. Like, this is a very complicated process, and almost every single bug I've ever dealt with is in this region. You're like trying to figure out how to actually do the storage and all that. They happen from sometimes. Sometimes your git list of movies, is in the wrong order, or you sorted it wrong. But those fixes are pretty simple. It's all like trying to manage this state change from state A to a state A prime, right? It's just like that simple change becomes excessively complex. PHP solves it. PHP solves it because PHP just says, you know what, no more of that. To this day, I still think front-end masters did a lot of things right. Because when I click this, it loads extremely fast. Like, that was a very fast load up. What was that? A half second? A quarter second? It was really, really fast. But look at this. It's not even a SPA. That was a full page reload. But you don't even notice it. You go to here, you don't even notice it. They didn't need to be. They recognize the fact that they don't need something complex. And if they just keep it really, 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 really lean, it's just going to work. And I just love that, that feel of everything, where it's just like you click it, it works, it's fast, it's not hard, and it's quick. Don't they use HTMX? They were exploring using HTMX. They're just vanilla JavaScript, right? And it feels good. It's fast. You don't need, they realize that they don't need all this stuff. And the thing is that even the things that are complicated, such as searching, what's it called? Watch this. Rebase, right? Look at that. I typed in the word rebase. Okay, what's a good one? Re. There's no mention of re right here. It's like searching through the logs of stuff, right? It's pretty impressive what they do. And it's fast. It's quick. It feels good. Hashtag ad. I don't get paid if you sign up. It's not an ad. I don't get paid. Transcript index somehow. Yeah. There's some really great stuff. There's some really great stuff there. But I just love that experience because the experience is actually really, really good. Because they didn't go complex. Data definitions in GraphQL, Squeal, JavaScript objects, and Python objects. This leads to shallow domains. These technologies departments act under constant pressure from business. When you need to spend so much time on ceremonies around frameworks, tech stacks, and serialization, there is not a lot of time left to work on business logic. So domains are shallow, with 90% being data transformation and I/O. Apps are shallow, but what we do want is to write deep domains. This is actually a really good idea. You know what you should do? You should try to time yourself on how much time you spend on working with the thing as opposed to working on the thing, right? Like, how much time do you actually spend solving real problems versus how much time do you spend solving problems around what you have built? It would be kind of a fun experiment to like actually rate yourself. Because I think that if you had like a high amount of time on business logic and a low amount of time on like problems around you doing your stuff, I think that that would be a really healthy business. And a really unhealthy business is one that has to constantly be fighting against what they've already written. I just hear it would be fun to maintain a timesheet. Well, yes. I mean, that part's not fun. I do agree that part's not fun. I would probably write a program that I could integrate with i3 or put something and say like maybe Rofi or in my D menu that I could literally just swap back and forth the times and see where I'm at. But yes, I understand. I have to do multiple. Timesheets are not fun. Timesheets are the devil. I'm just saying for my own personal experience, it would be neat to like look at how much time like you spend on which one. User problem versus your problems. Yeah. All right. I don't remember where I was at, but I completely agree with everything right here. Something about we were talking about like time clocks or something, so I can't remember. So we're just moving on, okay? I want you to know that this picture right here hurts my soul. How many of you have framework code? How much of you do this, right? What is this, 80-20? 80% of the time you're spending trying to get your thing set up versus 20% of the time actually writing your application. I think that as this time goes smaller, I would make the following argument, and I think this is a good argument. If you want to measure how impactful or radical your app actually is, it should be the percentage of code dedicated to your app versus integrating with frameworks and services. If your app is 95% integration with frameworks and services and 5% your own code that's actually doing something unique, I would say that your application effectively has no value. It's just plumbing. Anyone can dude, ChatGPT could generate that crap, right? Like that's not even hard. Okay, this is what ChatGPT is good at. You literally are just slow jippity. That's all. Devin is going to take your job. Okay, this is important. That's what's going to make you. That's what's going to make you money. Okay, this is just ceremony. Yeah, but sometimes you convince a bunch of people to give you money for plumbing and they don't know any better. This is true. This is modern VCs because VCs do invest heavily in this kind of crap, right? But if it's just a CRUD app that only integrates with other things, I mean, I think that your application isn't all that valuable then, right? It doesn't do anything that's unique, right? Radically simple applications have deep domains and little code in frameworks. I like it. What do we build complex systems and or why do we build complex systems and architectures? Complex architectures are a surrogate for real problems. Okay, this is interesting because there are hard problems. One of the hardest problems I've seen in a long time, and I've been lightly involved in, mostly just like from observational standpoint, is when I was doing the Netflix TV application, we only have left, right, up and down and enter, right? Like that's the only buttons you truly have. Technically, you could have a back button as well, but this is really all you get on TV. So how do you do focus? How does focus move? When you press down, where does focus go? Right? Like that's actually a really hard problem. You really have to think about how to make this thing happen. And then the problem is when you use something like React, you have to integrate that entire problem solving into the application, into the framework itself, which causes an enormous amount of complexity to be added. And that's what's currently on Television App is an entire focus system, Minkowski distances, all that good stuff, also muddled in and using React, which is really, really difficult. Yeah, for those that are wondering where the Chris Latner interview is, notice that I have Chris Latner on today, queued at 9 a.m. PT. All right. So let's hear this. Because we want to be challenged and domains are shallow, developers build their own challenges with new frameworks and systems. I actually disagree with this part as that's the reason why. I do agree that we do want to be challenged. I think everyone in here agrees with the fact that you want to work on something that is going to make you feel like you're growing as an engineer, right? Anyone going to argue that point? I assume every last person wants to work on something that makes them a better engineer, that makes them feel like they're learning, that makes them feel like they're actually getting something out of life. But I disagree that we create problems just for that sake. I honestly think that a lot of the complexity that comes from today's architecture is sold on Twitter and conferences. I think we largely have a conference-driven development because you were told it's the easiest. And no self-respecting engineer wouldn't. I mean, do you really want to use something in which could possibly make it hard to hire, right? Because there's all these engineers out there, right? Like, am I right here? Like, how many engineers are there right now that are looking for a job? Like, probably zero, right? Like what? Like zero engineers are looking for a job? Like, nobody's looking for a job. No one's willing to actually work on something that they don't know. So done with that argument. It's just such a stupid argument. It's such a stupid argument. People, like, if you could literally be like, hey, if I said I have a job right now, I would get 1,000 applications. I could say, hey, it's HTMX. Hey, it's HTMX in Vue. Hey, it's just Vue. Hey, it's Svelte. Hey, it's Astro with React. I would still get 1,000 applications no matter what I say. I would probably get the same thing. Hire me. The problem arising are manifold. As Rachel Kroll writes, code runs on people. Please keep it simple. The same goes for components and systems. Before code runs on a computer, it needs to run in your head. If it takes an hour to figure out what's going on, well, that's an hour that wasn't spent doing something else more useful and interesting. I dislike this statement, generally speaking. If you're new to a project, things should take time, right? There's a lot, like, again, if you can just instantaneously be useful, I don't know how deep your moat is. Gosh, is that true? Is that true? What I mean by that is, hear me out on this one. When I was working at Workiva, it's still what I'd consider my hardest, most technical job I've ever had. We had this thing called the viewer. And the viewer, this would run on an iPad too, by the way. You could touch, and you could zoom in, you could zoom out, and all the equations were in JavaScript. And my first bug was something to do with, like, when dragging this way, there's a problem. And on day one at my job, I got a bug, I got a computer, and I solved a bug day one. And it's because the code base, though a very complicated problem, the setup to be able to run little test applications and to be able to fix bugs was super, super simple. To run the actual whole application was really hard, but to run little bits was really, really trivial, and it allowed me to be very successful despite it being 100% custom JavaScript. There was no frameworks. We didn't even have Grunt. I introduced Grunt like 6 months into this process. So even the build process was a bespoke script. And so it's like, you know, why was I able to be so useful so quick? Maybe there is something about this that's really interesting. Like, maybe this idea of spending 1 hour, maybe that's not fair. But maybe saying if every single time you have to do something in your system, you have to spend hours just getting up to speed on how this particular part works, maybe there's something that's a little bit goofy about the whole situation. If you can't run it fast, debug it fast, then something's wrong. Maybe that's a better way of saying it, is that if you can't run and debug fast, then something's wrong. Because there's always some amount of hours spent just learning the thought process of how somebody arrived to this conclusion, especially if it's something complex. Like, imagine if you were given a kerning bug on a kerning system. There's like so much stuff you'd have to learn first before you could even become remotely useful. But if they had a really simple running system, you potentially could solve the kerning bug not even knowing about kerning. Right? Like, that's real. You could do that. On top of that, tech deals a lot of time with itself instead of delivering business value. Managing these many systems and components takes knowledge, and because there are edge cases, there are many bugs. Combined, these lead to low efficiency, to too many developers, and to high costs. Yeah, there is a weird explosion of things that just generally happen. I've never been on a team that does not eventually have a bunch of people working on stuff that feels confusing to me. Right? Like, at some point, there's like 3 people that are always working on a JavaScript build system, but the JavaScript build system always feels like ass. And I'm not sure why. I'm sure there's a real problem that I don't understand. I'm sure there's a real reason why things are difficult, but I just don't get it. So I'm just like, why? Why is this ass? Why does this feel difficult? Why are there full-time engineers working on a build system, yet the build system still sucks? What is going? I love how ass feels, though. Yeah, I get that. Here comes radical simplicity. What is radical simplicity? Radical simplicity means having as few components and moving parts as possible. Reuse technology for different purposes instead of having a new moving part for each purpose. Instead of using Postgres as a database, Druid for an event store, Redis for caching, RabbitMQ as a message queue, and Elastic for full text search, use a hosted Postgres as a database for full text search, HTML caching, publish and subscribe, and an event store with Timescale DB. This enables us to have deeper knowledge, move faster, and have a faster onboarding of new developers and have fewer things that can break. No upgrade planning for a dozen of frameworks and components, and more developer happiness. Core to developing is getting into the flow. Developers are much more productive when inside the flow than outside the flow. Breaking components, upgrading, and edge cases of databases you need to read about. Break that flow. This is a dude, we were literally just talking about this. Sometimes you just need a Postgres database. Sometimes, why don't you just start here? Until you feel the burden of scale, start with just an effing database. It is shocking how many people pre-plan for all this caching, for all this really high-performance stuff, for all this message queue, for everything they need. Especially if you're dropping into Elastic for full-text search, for their delicious JSON searching mechanism, and all you really need was some pretty simple stuff. I don't know about that. Something about that is just, it feels so emotionally painful, which is why are you committing to such intense stuff when you just need something that is so simple? We have vector search with 10,000 users. Yeah, you don't, Postgres has a lot of distance long before you need much else. Yeah, Postgres has 90% of those features, but I understand there comes a point where you can't use Postgres for everything, right? There's a point where you have too many people and there's too much actual searching, there's too much writing, there's too much locking, and there comes a point where you can no longer just use a single instance. You can't just vertically scale your machine, right? But you should consider first vertically scaling your machine. Until that thing costs way too much to continue to vertically scale it, or it becomes impossible, or it becomes untenable, then guess what? You probably are just fine. You're probably just fine. You don't need web scale. 90% of people will never reach the point where Postgres is no longer viable. 90% is a very generous base as hell scaling advice. Dude, it's so true. People reach for horizontal scaling long before they reach for vertical scaling, which is just kind of a weird way to go. Vertical scaling's pretty easy because you go like this. If you use fly, if I jump over here really quickly and I open up I quickly open up my fly YAML, watch this. I'm about to vertically scale. Everybody stand back. Boom. I just vertically scaled. Did you see that? You know what? I'm going to do it again. I literally just can handle twice as much. Oh, what was that? You want some more? Boom! 16x'd my memory, 32 times my cores, just like that. Kazam. Shazam. Oh, what was that? We need even more? Performance. Bam! Look at us. We're scaling the shit out of this thing. I know. Can you believe that? 10K USD bill? Absolutely a 10K USD bill. But you know what costs even less? Or do you know what costs even more? Having partially vertically scaled 8 different instances and a full-time engineer. Which one costs more? I forget again. Is it the 200K fully loaded senior infrastructure engineer plus your 5K a month worth of instances you're now saving? Or is it that 110K a month instance because you have to go balls to the wall on scaling for a while? I forgot. Which one is it? Should we do maybe math will help us here? Should I use math? Quick math? Okay, hold on. 200K divided by 12? Shit, I can't do that. It's not 10. I can't do the math. I guess it's probably cheaper. This is probably cheaper. It's probably cheaper. It's probably cheaper if you really think about it. Anyways, this enables us to have deeper knowledge, move faster, having faster onboarding of new developers, having fewer things that can break, no upgrade planning for dozens of frameworks and components. I've already read this section, but I completely agree with it. Basecamp. Oh, damn. People gonna get triggered. DHGH mentioned. The creators of Rails do radical simplicity. Basecamp. Can we rename Basecamp to Basecamp? Here, we're gonna go on Twitter. Let's see. This is gonna piss people off on Twitter. You know what? Never mind. I can't piss people off on Twitter. Okay, you know what? That's it. That's it. That's it. You need to come on stream. This guy wins. He's now on. He's now part of things. I was gonna say petition DHH to rename Basecamp to Based Camp. Bam. Anyways, I love when I go on and I'm getting ready to say something stupid or kind of like just dumb to say, and then I get totally hold my beard right like in the middle, in the process of attempting to do that. All right, Basecamp wrote their Hey Mail application with HTML and no React. Stack Overflow does this by running their services with small amounts of real hardware. There was that one thing. What was it? We read it yesterday or 2 days ago where it was just like, I don't get it. How does Stack Overflow only have $5,000 a month in server costs? We're currently spending like $50,000. It was some like outrageously high number versus outrageously low number. And someone responded with, "You're using PHP." It's just like, yeah, sometimes you have to use a faster language. This was also back in like 2010 when PHP was, or 2000 whatever, when PHP was just like actually super slow. Now it's like not that bad. Now you can run quite a bit of users, but back then you couldn't run a whole bunch of users. It's ironic that all the AWS questions are answered by Microsoft Squeal Server running on real hardware. No GraphQL, no React, no Kafka, no Webpack, no Kubernetes. Is it ironic? Is it ironic? I think the only thing that's ironic is saying the word Microsoft Squeal Server. Okay, that is actually offensive. If you just honestly, I think this article would have been perfect if they would have said Postgres and not that. Now that you said that, what am I supposed to do with this information? Now all of a sudden I hate it. You can use Radical Simplicity too. Radical Simplicity is Radical, a monolith that spills out HTML that is refreshed on the browser side with Hotwire Turbo with minimal JavaScript. Yeah, you can also do that with HTMX. You can do it with Laravel and Livewire. Using only managed Postgres as a database for data storage for JSON, job handling as a message queue, and columnar, I can literally never say this word, stored as your data lake and data warehouse. If you can't resist, by the way, data lake, are we talking about, is that related to the same kind of like the dyeing process on oils? If you can't resist, then add Redis for caching because Redis never breaks. It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny. The thing is that this works probably for your application. Can we just be real for a second? That probably works for your application. It's wild that this exists. Okay. The thing is, I do think more people should reach for this than this. I'm not saying don't use serverless or do use serverless or don't use Vercel or do use Vercel or Netlify or Fly. I like Fly. I use Fly, but Fly allows you to kind of build it yourself. The reason why I like Fly is because if you want to raw dog a TCP connection on Fly, you can do that. You can have a single machine that runs for hours. You can have it go up and down. You can do this. You can do that. You can kind of like, you can run Fly the way you want, and it's pretty simple, right? AI just died so fast, or am I living under a rock? No, most AI is just stupid. Many startups with only a few customers have several microservices: Redis, Postgres, Elastic, Kubernetes, Webpack, a JavaScript SPA, REST APIs, GraphQL with Apollo and Kafka, and or RabbitMQ for message queue or job server. Compare this to a radically simple setup that only uses hosted Postgres instead of all these things, unpoly to render HTML on the server in a monolith, and BigQuery for analytic warehouse. I think I honestly, now that I'm thinking about this, I think where some of these problems come from is that there's these stories of people that have to go from a monolith to some sort of microservice-based architecture, or they run into this problem where they can't release anymore because things are too difficult due to their monolith application. And I think that all those stories gave people allergies to solving problems, but instead to solve problems that could happen as they scale into the future. Like, I agree that transferring from a monolith app into a microservice thing would be very hard. And when you get to the point where your monolith application is actually struggling, like, I actually fully agree with that is really a difficult thing, and that's going to be a difficult transition. But I also want you to remember that if you're struggling at that point, you probably have, 20, 30, 40, 50 engineers. You probably have actually created a successful company. You probably have millions upon millions of dollars in runway. You know, you're probably in a good place to make those decisions. You probably can do a good job. And maybe, just maybe, it's okay then to complain about, man, this is really, really hard. But man, you know what's really good? I didn't waste all my time and I was able to get to the point of earning money before I made this problem. By the way, again, unhappy engineer. Appreciate that. Thank you, buddy. I'm in the middle of doing this. You know what? But you do actual software engineering. Your monolith is probably not that hard to split up. A couple messes are hard, regardless of architecture. This is true. Whether or not you're in microservices or monolith, just absolute slop thrown together will always be hard. Like, can we just be real for a second? Even good architecture, no matter if it's microservices or monoliths, to change it from one to the other is hard. I don't think there exists a world in which that isn't a hard activity. And to think that one is somehow, like, saying that going from a monolith to microservices is super hard is not indicative that monoliths are bad, right? It's just that scaling is hard. It's hard no matter what, because you have to make just crazy decisions. Like, you don't need to make this idea of distributive data warehouses where you could have, failover and eventual consistency. Like, that only exists in a world in which one machine can't run the requests. Like, it's hard. Why would you do that to yourself? A much smaller setup that achieves the same but has fewer moving parts that need to be maintained, learned, and debugged. Many fewer components need to be monitored, added to a logging server and alerts created. Do some companies need that complex setup when they have 50-plus developers and millions of users? Yes. Do most companies, especially in their first years, need that setup? No. Agreed. Let's go. Radically simple. Just do that. Just... Vue, Nuxt, Webpack, Babels, JavaScript Spa, REST API, Queel, Postgres, Redis, Elasticsearch, Kubernetes. When your needs grow and more moving parts, but slowly, challenge yourself if you really need that new part. Radical simplicity means extending your existing technology first. For example, if you need REST/GraphQL for native mobile applications, use Hasura to automatically create REST GraphQL from Postgres database. That sounds kind of nightmarish. I typically don't like this word. Whenever I see this, to me, this seems like this is going to be a headache. I think I would rather just write the simple code to have, API, or JSON / or whatever you need to do to have those two APIs, as opposed to, I bet it's not even automatic. I typically am very skeptical of anything that has automagic to it, because I find that whenever you do that, it's really difficult. GraphQL by itself is a bunch of automatic generated crap. Yes. Typically, when you do that, it sucks. All right, you know what? I have to get up. I have to pee. Flip, take it out. Dude, I just drank too much everything this morning. Is radical simplicity the same as choose boring technology? It goes in the same direction, reducing risk and increasing efficiency. I want to see what is choosing boring technology. I'm curious. Let's see, what is boring technology? Because it almost seems like today, boring technology, it's hard to know what boring technology even is at this point. I want to go read that now, but I don't know that. I don't know if we have that. PHP, not Boeing technology, boring. Yeah, we don't want Boeing technology. Golang is a great, Django. Golang, boring. It goes in the same direction, reducing the risk and increasing efficiency. While choose boring technology also addresses a number of pieces, if each tech is expensive, you should pick a few. It mainly focuses on choosing proven technology, and with proven technology, you can still create complex architectures and setup. Combining radical simplicity with choosing boring technology results in the best outcome. Choose Postgres is what this whole entire thing is. Just use Postgres. Radical simplicity also works with existing technology if you have enough money to hire those few engineers proficient in it. But it's much easier to go with Postgres. Pre-read. That was so pre-read. Let's see. Much easier to work with Postgres instead of nifty new database and PHP. And PHP instead of a funky new functional language. I don't know. OCaml's pretty cool. It would be fun to have a job in OCaml for a while. There are many more positive side effects of radical simplicity. Features get delivered faster. Founders need less developers to deliver more. The company can move faster, can easier adapt, and can easier pivot to something else. Radical simplicity gives your startup a much higher chance of success instead of failure. If you are a founder, insist on radical simplicity. Indie hackers, they're actually, I have a friend, his name is Rox. Rox Codes. Rox Codes. At one point, he tweeted that he tweeted something along the lines of, "I have more microservices than users," and he was deeply unhappy trying to get Amazon and all these things because he was building out some hyperscaling thing, and he realized how stupid it was to build out all those stuff. And it was just so funny watching like this tweet storm from him of him slowly losing his mind using all these technologies to build stuff when he could just build something small because, there's only going to be a few hundred users, 1,000 users, 10,000 users anyways. So it's just like, I loved it. It was one of my favorite, like, the destruction of one's mind on Twitter. Can you love radical simplicity as a developer? It isn't all about new technologies. Isn't that what brought you into programming in the first place? I think what brought you into programming is the challenge of solving problems. Yep, that was for me at least. I'm very curious if just using new technologies is the reason why people go into programming. Maybe that's the thing. But for me, it was just the problem-solving nature. The challenge should not come from learning new technologies, but from solving deep problems. Ooh, I like this. Ooh, I like that. With more time on your hands, it's easier to solve challenging problems in the domain with new algorithms and deep features than, that astonish users, and not shallow features like storing data in a database from a form. Hey, if you could store my database values, though, that's pretty impressive. I will say, though, that, like, right now I'm trying a new language out, right? Zig. And I've absolutely enjoyed using Zig. It's been a lot of fun using it. It's been really, really interesting using it. But I'm using it by solving a problem that I've never solved, which is creating my own game. And so most of my time is spent thinking about the game. A little bit of my time is spent about learning Zig. And now that I've learned Zig for the most part, I think I pretty much have everything I need to understand Zig to be, decently effective. It's just been a lot of fun. And so I spend all my time building the problem, not learning, not storing the data, as he says. If you find yourself just doing that, I feel for you. Try not to be there. How not to be that senior dev who's a senior because they spent X amount of time at a company. Well, ask me at another time, baby. Come on. We're in the middle of something. Just hold on. Can you do radical simplicity? Yes. As a founder, you need to manage your CTO. Otherwise, he or she will build a dream castle of technology. Is that true? If you're already following Lean Startup for maximal chances for your startup, Radical Simplicity perfectly matches Lean Startups on the technology side of things. Radical Simplicity forms a trinity together with Lean Startup for a business and Scrum for process. Okay, now you lost me. Dude, this article was just like completely on track or just completely went off track out of nowhere. How can you argue for Radical Simplicity and Scrum at the same time? What the hell just happened? Can somebody explain to me? How did that just go? Dude, how did that... Uncle Bob doesn't support Scrum. Okay? We talked about it. Uncle Bob and I had a talk on stream about that. And he talked about it not being great. It enables to experiment fast, deliver early, and pivot if necessary. A bloated architecture ties you down and sabotages your lean startup endeavor. I do agree with that, but man, crazy statement here. As a CTO, you need to build an environment where people can grow and experiment without relying on growing tech zoo. Instead, find challenges from businesses that can be solved with your inventions, your cleverness, your ingenuity, and algorithms, and not by more toys from the shelf. It's an interesting proposition. Because most of the time, you don't need to invent something. You can just, this is the big conundrum of today's software development, which is from one side of the world, you're going to hear, don't reinvent the wheel, right? And then from the other side, you pretty much hear, invent the wheel. And so which one do you choose? Do you use the fancy system that is promised to do everything correct for one thing, or do you just use some off the shelf, or do you just use what you already have to kind of create some semi version of it that just fits just your needs? What happens if your needs change? All those kind of things. People ask all these questions, and I think that's how they end up going on this side of things, where they just use these off-the-shelf super solutions, right? Like we were just talking about it. Effect.js, right? Or Effect.ts, or whatever it's called. Somebody wants to be able to have a function that can return a result object. And they just want to make sure that they can have results as values. So they bring in an entire library that has throttling, that has debouncing, that has everything, just to have one feature. And sometimes you have to ask yourself, does this make any sense? Does this approach to life make any sense? Because eventually you have like 10 libraries that do a whole bunch of things, and you're using one feature from each, and all you really needed was an async queue. That's like, what, 16, 20 lines of code. With error retries, I think it's about 25 lines of code. Live by the wheel, die by the wheel. Like, real talk, like, I can't tell you, I've seen people bring in Effect.js, specifically Effect.js, for an async request queue. And I literally used to use async request queue as an interview question because it's such a simple problem that you can write in 30 minutes if you're unexperienced with it. And you can probably write it in 15 minutes if you know the problem domain at all. Like, it's that simple. And I'm just like, dude, what? Okay, like, I get you don't want to write stuff, but you just spent an hour learning and reading the docs for something you could have written in a half an hour yourself and then changed to be just our needs. And it blows my mind. And you see this all the time. For my proudest coding moments were figuring out an algorithm for Towers of Hanoi as a kid and writing my own full-text search way before there were frameworks like Lucene. Effing Lucene. Google search has a simple UI, but a deep domain. When you enter 2 plus 2, it doesn't search for this term, but prints a calculator and shows 4. This is a deep feature that users enjoy. It can be done, so do it. Radicals, that's funny that they mentioned Google, because Google is like the opposite of radical anything. They literally just kill product after product and build like half-baked versions of everything and then call it done. Radical simplicity takes all the technology that doesn't deliver custom value. Radical simplicity leads to deep domains and deep tech. Radical simplicity leads to higher quality, makes everyone happy, makes it easy for new developers to understand the system. I love this one. This one's great. This is great. This is great. This is great. This is great. Makes setting up and testing easy. This is great also. By the way, he doesn't mention SQLite, which I'm a little bit shocked about, because SQLite, if you're not familiar with SQLite operates on files. It's really good. And if you want to test something, you could literally have your golden database setups as a file, and for your testing process, you literally just CP the file, then run the test as if it's a full-ass integration test. Right? Like, that's crazy that you can do that. That's amazing, right? Like, when you have to do a database and you can just CP the perfect state in, you're like, huh, that's pretty awesome. SQLite solves so many cases, especially in CI. Yeah, it's wild how good SQLite is. And SQLite has been being rewritten. They have libsqueal now, which is really, really great by the Terso folks. Like, there's a lot of really good stuff out there. Puts you back in control. Radical simplicity wins. All right, so about Stefan, as a CTO, interim CTO coach, and developer, Stefan has seen many technology departments and fast-growing startups. This is where the idea of radical simplicity comes from, because he has seen too many complex setups that costed money and had their problems. By the way, shouldn't have recommended Scrum. I'm still a little bit hurt about that. He taught himself coding in a department store around 1981 with a VIC-20 BASIC and went to write code, and was paid for many of them. In a Commodore 64 BASIC, 6502 machine code, CPC BASIC, Z80 machine code, 68000 machine code, Amiga BASIC, GFA BASIC, Blitz BASIC, Q BASIC. I started on Q BASIC, Turbo Pascal, Modulo 2, Oberon, Delphi, C, C++, Lisp, Prolog. What the hell are you doing in Prolog? Every now and then you see these people talking about how they're using Prolog. What do you do with Prolog? Just a real basic bitch coming in here. Yeah, but real, what do you do with Prolog? As far as I can tell, the only thing you do with Prolog is being like, Sharon wants a corner office, but Bill wants to be next to Sharon. And then Bill can't be next to Bob, but Bob wants to be next to Charlene, and Charlene does not want to be next to Sharon. What's the setup? And it's just like, bloop, 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 solve. Like, what are you doing with Prolog? I don't even know. Perl, Python, Java. Okay, now you're just mentioning things you've programmed. JavaScript, Scala, Erlang, Haskell, TypeScript, Go, and Rust, amongst others. I just doubt you actually have any, like, can you really have deep expertise in all of these, or have you just written them? Because then if you just have written them, then I could pretty much say all the same languages. Using VIC-20s, Sinclair's, C64, Sharp pocket computers, CPCs, Amigas, B-Boxes, Alteri STs, MS-DOS machines, Window machines, Linux pre-distro machines, Suns, SGIs, Nextcubes. Is that like GameCubes but different? And many Quadress, iMacs, Mac Cubes, MacBooks, Mac Pros, iMac Pro. Stefan has founded several startups and worked on small and large companies as CTO. After he sold his latest startup, he took up CTO coaching. You can find him on LinkedIn. He also wrote a CTO book. I really loved the beginning of this. I really am disappointed by the Scrum, but overall, this is a great article, and I think a lot of people need to just take this approach to most things. Please be a bit more radical with your simplicity and also in your management. Don't jump into Scrum. You really don't want a Scrum master and Scrum and meetings and planning poker and retros and postmortems and every last little bit when probably all you need is 3 developers to meet once a week for 15 minutes and say, hey, these are the things I'm doing. I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody. And then you meet again in 5 days. If you need to meet every day to pivot that fast, you've done something wrong, okay? And here's the deal. If you are pivoting that fast, you probably are a very new startup. And if you're a very new startup, you probably don't need stand-ups for your developers to communicate. They're probably talking all the time anyways because they're constantly stepping on each other's toes because the code base isn't that big and you're just trying to figure out everything you're doing. So this is just a bunch of bullshit on the entire proposed management system. Gosh! Just making me angry. The name is the Primogen.